Is it possible to make a full table's worth of terrain in a single weekend? I don't know. We'll find out. The terrain has to be something that's easy to make if we have to complete it in only 2 days. So I'll try to make a bunch of hills. There's a lot to do, so let's get started. I'll use this masonite board as a base. The first thing I'll do is I'll draw some bases on the masonite, cut them out, and then I'll glue them onto the styrofoam. It's been about an hour, so the glue should be dry now. Next I'll divide the foam into individual pieces using a knife, and then I'll use my Proxxon hot wire table to cut away the excess. And by the way, you don't need any hot wire tools, you can use a knife instead, because we're gonna cover up the foam later on anyway. The hot wire tools just make it easier and less messy. Now the next step is to shape the hills. My main concern is to make them playable, so I'll make a lot of big flat areas. Most of them are too small to have a playable incline if we also want them to be tall, because that would mean the miniatures would fall over quite easily. So there'll probably be a lot of plateaus. That's fine. Let's get back to work. So, that turned out alright. The hills are a little more stylized than I was expecting, but that's fine. Next I want to add some decorations before I add the ground texture. I'm gonna use some of these bits and pieces I have from Games Workshop, and I have some plaster rocks that I made previously, and I have some bits of wood and stuff like that, just to create a little more variation to the hills. Everything's looking good. I've got some more details on the hills, and now we are ready to add the ground texture. The recipe for ground texture I've been using recently is a mixture of spackle, glue, paint, water and coconut fiber. And that's what we are going to use here. This is the last task for today, so let's get back to work. Welcome to day 2. Unfortunately, I ran out of ground texture last night and I didn't have the materials to make a new batch. So that's what we'll be doing this morning. Unfortunately, that means that the ground texture won't be dry before I have to apply the flock. So I'm gonna have to try to do that while the ground texture is still a bit wet, but I think we can manage. If I can finish the ground texture in the morning, I can let it sit and dry for a couple of hours before I have to apply the flock, so maybe that'll be fine, we'll see. So I'll just get that done and I'll see you in a moment. I finished applying the ground texture to the hills and they've had a little time to dry a bit. Now it's time to paint the rocks and the ruins, and if I have enough time I'll also paint the sticks, but it depends on how much time I have left. So back to work. Now it's time for my favorite part, applying flock. We have some coconut fiber, dried soil, some foam flocks, flowers and static grass. I haven't played with these as much as I'd like, so I'll try throwing on a bunch of stuff on the hills. If you want to do something like this, you don't actually need all this stuff. You can get good results with 2 or 3 different colors, and a couple of small bags of foam flocks doesn't cost much. The 4mm static grass doesn't look great if you don't have a static grass applicator, so I'd recommend that you buy some tufts instead. As always, thanks to my patrons, and I'd like to welcome the newest members of the cult, Gurgathor Grimm and Matt Brower. If you'd like to support the channel, joining the Patreon is the best way to do so. It is Monday. Did we succeed in making the hills in 2 days? No! Not even close. It's actually the following Monday, and it ended up taking the whole week to finish the hills. It did just take around 15 hours of actual work time, but because of drying times it had to be done over a full week. The ground texture was the main problem, so if you skipped that and just carved some hills out of some XPS foam and painted it up, you could easily do that in a weekend, perhaps even a single day. And now it's time to see the final result.